The wind howled through the broken buildings like a ghost that had forgotten how to rest. Rusted metal creaked. Empty roads stretched across dead cities. No voices, no footsteps, only the cold hum of machines that had long outlived their purpose. John stood on the roof of his bunker, wrapped in a thick coat made from scavenged fabric. His eyes scanned the lifeless horizon. Clouds moved slowly overhead, heavy with ash and old memories. He wasn't watching for beauty. There was none left. He was watching for movement. For 3 years he hadn't seen a single living thing. He was the last human. At least that's what everyone said before the final signal went dark. Earth was abandoned, destroyed, burned by war and left to rot. John didn't leave. Some said it was madness. Others called it loyalty. But John stayed behind because of a promise. A promise made to a wife who died screaming, and a daughter he still kept in a locked cryopod underground. His days were simple, routine, boring. Even fix the generators, check the water recyclers, read old books, talk to no one. Just him in silence, until tonight. A high-pitched beep echoed through the bunker's mainframe. A flashing red light lit up the dark corner of his control room. Motion detected. Outer perimeter breached. John's heart slammed into his ribs. He grabbed his old pulse rifle and sprinted up the narrow stairs to the surface. Dust filled the air as he threw open the security hatch. The cold air bit his skin, but he barely noticed. He climbed to the roof and crouched low behind a rusted solar panel. His eyes scanned the barren land beyond the fence. Nothing. Then, movement. His breath caught. 2 figures stumbled through the haze. One tall, one small, both thin, limping, wrapped in rags. The taller one collapsed just outside the fence, pulling the smaller body close. A strange shape, not human. Aliens. John cursed under his breath. His finger hovered over the rifle's trigger. Memories rushed in. Blood, screams, explosions. The aliens had started the war. They killed his wife, took his home. Why would he trust one now? But something was wrong. The taller alien lifted her hand. Not a weapon, just her hand, shaking, open. The smaller one, a child, didn't move. His head rested against her shoulder, weak and still. John's heart did something it hadn't done in years. It cracked. He zoomed in through his scope. The woman's skin was a pale blue, her eyes glowing faintly, filled with fear and something else, desperation. She looked straight at the camera drone above the fence and whispered something, though he couldn't hear it. Then she dropped her head, clutching the child tighter as if bracing for death. John lowered his weapon. No, this wasn't a trap. These two weren't soldiers. He rushed to the gate controls and slammed his hand on the override. The electric hum faded as the metal bars slid open. He stepped outside, rifle still in hand, but aimed at the ground. "Stop right there," he called. "Who are you?" The alien woman looked up slowly, her lips cracked from dryness. Her voice came out in broken, shaking English. "Please, not enemy, just mother, just need help, please." The boy. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. The child whimpered weakly, barely conscious. John looked at them, unsure what to do. Every instinct screamed, "Don't trust them." But something else whispered, "They're not soldiers. They're survivors." He moved closer. The boy's skin was covered in dust, and he looked no older than 6 or 7, if their species aged like humans. His face was too thin. His breathing was shallow. "They're sick," John muttered. He bent down, slung the boy over his shoulder, and helped the mother to her feet. She flinched at his touch but didn't resist. "Inside, now," he said, back in the bunker. John placed the boy on a medical cot and connected the scanner. The mother sat quietly nearby, eyes wide, watching every move. The computer beeped. Severe dehydration. Starvation. No critical infection. He turned to the mother. "You've been running a long time." She nodded. "Since escape from slave camp. They chased us." John frowned. "They failed." She looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but full of fire. "Bad ones. Still hunting. No safe place. Her the human. The last thought, maybe you would help. He stared at her for a long moment. You're lucky, he said quietly. I almost didn't open the gate. She gave a sad smile. You did. That's enough. John stood, glancing at the child, who now breathed steadily in sleep. He didn't say it aloud, but deep down, he knew it. His life had just changed forever. John didn't sleep that night. He sat at the corner of the medical room, his pulse rifle across his lap, eyes locked on the two strange beings now breathing under his roof. Rinya, the mother, had fallen asleep sitting on the floor beside the cot. Her hand rested protectively on the boy's chest. She hadn't moved in hours, not even when the metal floor made her shiver. John didn't trust her. He wanted to. He hated that he wanted to. He stared at the kid's sleeping face. Kale, that's what she had called him. Just a child, thin as paper, pale like frost, barely breathing when John brought him in. And yet, still alive. The scanner beeped softly. Heartbeat, normal. Breathing steady. Fluids were working. But the silence around John wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. His brain raced with questions. Why now? Why them? Why here? His hands tightened around the weapon. At sunrise, the bunker lights flickered from night mode to low, warm daylight. The shift made Kale stir, letting out a soft, hoarse whimper. His eyes fluttered, then opened, bright green, almost glowing. Rinya woke instantly, alert like a soldier. She looked at John, then at her son, then back again. Thank you, she whispered. John didn't reply. She slowly reached for a blanket and tucked it around Kale's small body. Then hesitantly, she stood, arms away from her sides, trying not to appear dangerous. She faced John, who still sat with the gun in his lap. I know, you don't trust us, she said quietly, her voice broken but calm. I wouldn't either. You're not the first alien to step on this soil, John said flatly, and most of them tried to kill what was left of us. Rinya nodded. They tried to kill us too. John frowned. You're saying your own kind. They are not my kind, she snapped, then softened. Not anymore. They used to be, before they lost their soul. Now they only conquer. My planet, my people. We were one of the first to be enslaved. She lowered her eyes, then looked at Kale again. I ran. They hunted me. But I heard your signal. An old one. A human broadcast. A rumor. A myth. I followed it. I didn't expect it to be real. It was real, John said. 15 years ago, my wife set that beacon up. She's not here. John looked away. His jaw tightened. No. Rinya nodded again, reading the silence. Then you are alone. I was. Sci-Fi. John stood up finally, setting the rifle down but keeping it within reach. He walked over to a cabinet, pulled out a ration pack and placed it on the table. You hungry? Her eyes lit up like she hadn't heard that word in months. I haven't eaten in 2 days. Kale even longer. Then eat. She moved carefully to the table, almost like she thought it might be a trick. Her fingers trembled as she opened the pack. The food wasn't much. Some protein paste and dried fruit. But to her, it looked like a feast. She took one bite, then stopped and looked at John. Can I give it to Kale first? John blinked, surprised. It's yours. You eat. I will, she said. But he comes first. Without waiting for permission, she broke a piece and gently woke her son, feeding him tiny pieces until he could chew. The boy smiled for the first time, weak but real. John watched quietly. It was a familiar sight. It stabbed him in the heart. His daughter used to smile just like that. Later, as Kale slept again, John and Rinya sat across from each other near the bunker's heater. You don't look like the others, he said. I don't act like them either, she answered. You spoke English fast. That's not normal. I studied it in secret, for years, hoping someday I'd reach Earth. Well, not much left of it, but you are here, she said, and that means something still breathes. John looked at her closely. Why did you really come here? I'm not lying, she replied. I need sanctuary. I need safety, and I need someone who hasn't forgotten what kindness looks like. You were lucky I opened the gate. I know. I almost didn't. She nodded. I was ready to die out there, but I had to try. For Kay. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, John saw something in her he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. He leaned back in the chair, staring up at the steel ceiling. I don't know if I can protect you, he said honestly. You don't have to, Renia whispered. Just let us rest. We won't bring harm. John closed his eyes. He had built this shelter to survive, not to save others, not to become anyone's hero. He wasn't ready for this, but maybe, deep inside, part of him had always wanted to hear another voice again, a child's laugh, a mother's thing, something real, something human, even if they weren't. He finally spoke. You can stay, for now. Renia bowed her head. Thank you, John. And for the first time in years, he whispered back, you're welcome. John had rules. Rules kept him alive when the world had gone to hell. Rule 1, never trust anyone, especially not aliens. Rule 2, never talk about the past. Rule 3, never open the locked door. That last one was most important. That room held everything he couldn't forget, and everything he wasn't ready to face. But now there were two strangers, sleeping under his roof, a mother, and her sick child, and something in John's chest, something he thought was long dead, was starting to stir. That night, he stood outside the medical room, listening to Cale breathe. The sound was slow, steady now. Renia had fallen asleep on the floor again, one hand still resting on her son's back. John didn't wake them. He walked to the far end of the shelter, past the power core, past the water tanks, all the way to the old door. The steel was cold, even under the heat lamp. He placed a trembling hand on the scanner. Access denied. Authorized personnel only. John sighed. That voice used to belong to his wife. She had recorded it as a joke, but now it felt like a ghost whispering through the metal. He turned away. Cale was stronger now. He could sit up and eat small bites of rehydrated stew. His voice was soft, but his eyes were bright, curious. He watched everything John did, followed him with his gaze, as if trying to understand this strange human man. John brought over a small screen and played an old cartoon. The boy's face lit up. Renia smiled from across the room. He's never seen anything like this, she said. John nodded. Most human kids haven't either. Not in years. Cale giggled at the moving pictures, and something sharp twisted in John's chest. It sounded just like her. Later that day, John stepped into the old storage room to fix a broken drone. He didn't notice the quiet footsteps behind him. Cale had followed him. The boy didn't speak, just stood in the doorway, hugging a blanket. His eyes darted around the room like he was mapping every bolt and wire. You lost? John asked, wiping oil from his hands. Cale shook his head. No. John raised a brow. You're not supposed to wander. Your mom is sleeping, the boy interrupted gently. John chuckled. Figures. He went back to work, but Cale didn't leave. He walked slowly around the edge of the room, studying the machines. Then his small hand reached out and touched something on the far wall. A keypad, the one near the locked door. Before John could stop him, Cale tapped a few random buttons. Beep, beep, click. The lock disengaged. John froze. The door creaked open. No, John shouted, but it was too late. Cale stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by blue emergency lights. In the center stood a cryopod, glass sealed, covered in frost. Vines of wire crawled along the floor. The air smelled like old metal and sadness. Cale walked up to the pod and placed his hand on the glass. Inside, a little girl lay still, eyes closed, hair floating gently in the cold liquid. She looked no older than 7. Cale whispered, "Who is she?" John stood frozen in the doorway, his hands shaking. He hadn't been in this room in 2 years. "She's my daughter," he finally said. Cale turned to look at him, confused. "She's sleeping." John nodded slowly. "Yes, cry asleep. It's like frozen time. She was sick during the war. I was supposed to wake her when it was safe again. Is it safe now?" Kale asked. John didn't answer. She had followed the noise, and now stood behind John, eyes wide. John clenched his jaw. She had a rare blood condition. Doctors couldn't treat her because of the war. My wife put her in the pod before she died, hoping the future would be kinder. She doesn't age in, Renya asked, softly. No, but it's dangerous to wake someone too soon. Renya took a step closer. Why haven't you tried? John looked at his daughter's face, frozen in peace. Because I didn't want her to see this world. Not yet. Renya said nothing, but her expression told him everything. Pain, sympathy, and something more. Understanding. Kale touched the glass again, and whispered something in his language. What did he say? John asked. Renya smiled gently. He said she looks strong. He said, she's waiting for you. John looked down. He had spent years building walls around himself. Emotional ones, steel ones, but in this one moment, they all felt weak. That night, John stood at the door of the cryopod room. He didn't enter. He just stood there, watching his daughter, the way he had done so many times before. But now, something was different. She wasn't alone anymore. There was a boy who smiled like her, a mother who knew what it meant to protect a child at all costs, and a voice, deep in his mind, that whispered, maybe it's time. John had built the shelter to keep things out, but now, something had made its way in, something deeper than air, or dust, or danger, memories. He sat alone at the dining table staring at his untouched food. The soft buzz of the ceiling lights hummed above him. Down the hallway, Renya and Kale slept. Behind the sealed cryopod door his daughter floated peacefully. Everything was quiet, but his thoughts were loud. At 4 a.m., the alarm buzzed. Unknown activity detected. Sector 3. Storage bay. John jumped up, grabbing his sidearm. He ran through the metal corridors, boots pounding against the floor. As he reached the bay, the door was already cracked open. Inside, Kale stood in the dark. Again. What the hell are you doing? John snapped. Kale turned slowly. I heard noises. John frowned. Noises? From what? Kale pointed to the wall specifically. A large steel panel near the back corner. Behind that, John's breath caught. He hadn't thought about that section in years. It wasn't even marked on the shelter map anymore. Kale stepped back. As John approached the wall, dust covered it. No lights. No control screen. Just bolts and darkness. John brushed his fingers across the metal. Boom. Something knocked back from the other side. His blood ran cold. 10 minutes later, Renya stood beside him, fully awake, gripping a plasma cutter. Her face was pale. There's something back there, she asked. There wasn't supposed to be, John said. But something knocked. He nodded. He nodded. Yeah. She looked at him. So what is this place? Really? John hesitated. This shelter was built by Earth's Emergency Response Division, not just for civilians. This was a command site, one of the last before the fall. You didn't tell me that. I didn't want to. He looked back at the panel. There are parts even I never opened. I thought it was just a sealed-off storage wing. Another thud came from inside, softer this time, like someone dragging metal along the floor. Renya raised her plasma cutter. Let's find out. The cut took 20 minutes. Sparks flew. The smell of hot steel filled the room. Kale watched from behind a protective screen, holding his blanket tightly. The panel dropped with a loud crash, revealing a narrow corridor lit by flickering red lights. A low, mechanical hum echoed through the hallway. Cold air rushed out like a breath from the past. John entered first, weapon raised. Renya followed close behind. They walked slowly. Every step echoed like a shout. The corridor opened into a large hidden chamber, and inside, rows and rows of cryopods. Not human. Alien. What the hell is this? Renya whispered, eyes wide. John approached the nearest pod. A tag blinked on the display. Specimen 42A. High threat level. Keep sealed. The creature inside, Looked like a hybrid between a soldier and a monster. Large, armored, scarred. Its breathing was slow, alive. This is a containment wing, John muttered. Not just storage. Rinya checked another pod. These were prisoners, more like trophies, John said grimly. Captured during the war. Studied, locked away. Why keep them? John shook his head. Weapons, bio-research. We were trying to win, even at the end. Rinya stared at him. Your people were desperate. We were dying. Suddenly a sharp alarm beeped across the hidden room. Power stability compromised. Pod 42A. Integrity failing. The lights flashed red. One of the pods, the one closest to Kale's earlier knock, let out a loud hiss. Back, John shouted. The glass cracked, then burst. A large figure fell to the floor, gasping, clawing the ground. It wasn't dead. It was waking up. John aimed his weapon. Rinya, get Kale and run. She didn't hesitate. She sprinted back through the corridor. The alien lifted its head. Its eyes were yellow and filled with rage. Don't move, John ordered. But the thing lunged. John fired. Once, twice. Sparks flew. The alien screamed, charging again. Even with burns smoking from its chest, it knocked John into a wall. Pain shot through his shoulder. He reached for a pipe, swung it with all his strength. Crack. The alien dropped, not dead, but unconscious. John staggered back, bleeding. Minutes later, back in the main hall, Rinya patched up his shoulder, while Kale sat quietly on the floor. That thing could have killed us, she said. I know, you said this place was safe. I thought it was. She looked at him, serious. So what now? John stood slowly. We seal it again. But what if others wake up? John looked at Kale, who hadn't said a word since the creature appeared. We don't let them, he said. We lock it down, and we prepare. That night, John stood in front of his daughter's cryopod again. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. For the first time, he whispered aloud, this place was never just a shelter. It was a trap, for the enemy. And now, for us too. He touched the glass. I wanted to wake you in peace, but maybe peace is a dream we can't afford anymore. Behind him, Kale's soft voice whispered, I'm not afraid, not if you protect us. John turned, surprised. Kale looked up at him. I trust you. And for the first time in years, John believed in something again. The skies over Earth hadn't glowed red in years, but that night, they did. John was asleep in the control chair, an old book in his lap. The lights dimmed low. Kale was curled up on the couch in a blanket. Rinya stood at the main window, staring at the distant clouds turning crimson. She had seen skies like that before, and every time, they brought death. The sirens screamed without warning. Unidentified aerial units entering atmosphere. 6 confirmed. Estimated impact. 2 minutes. John shot to his feet, heart pounding. Not possible, he muttered. No one's come here in years. Rinya was already pulling Kale close. Her voice was calm, but urgent. They followed us. John's eyes widened. The slavers? Yes, she whispered. They never stop hunting. Damn it. He raced to the terminal and brought up the defense system. We don't have enough firepower for this. Then we hide, Rinya said. But John didn't move. His hands hovered over the keyboard. There was one option, a backup defense grid, an old Earth weapon buried deep beneath the bunker, nuclear-based, overkill. It could level the valley, and it hadn't been tested in 17 years. Too risky, John whispered. Could kill us too. Another warning beep. Vessels landing in 90 seconds. He slammed the terminal closed. No time. We fall back. They ran to the lower level. The shelter had been designed with emergencies in mind. Thick blast doors, sealed panic rooms, but nothing was ever truly safe when aliens came hunting. Kale clung to Rinya. His eyes were wide, his small fingers clutching her tightly. What do they want? John asked as they descended the ladder. They want Kale, Rinya said softly. John turned to her shocked. Why? Rinya looked down. He's not normal. Not fully. His father,
He wasn't like me. He was highborn, a leader of their kind. That makes Kale important. To them, John asked. To their control, she said. They don't like free bloodlines. John stared at Kale, who now seemed more fragile than ever. So they'll kill us to get him. Rhaenyra nodded. Unless we stop them first. Above ground, the alien ships landed with a roar. Dark shapes moved through the dust. Tall armored beings, with glowing eyes and long weapons. 6 soldiers spread out through the ruins. They moved like wolves, fast, silent, deadly. Inside the bunker, lights flickered. They were already hacking the system. John grabbed his pulse rifle and opened the secret weapons cabinet. I've got a few old tricks left. He handed Rhaenyra a blaster. Can you shoot? I've shot worse. John smiled grimly. Good. They positioned themselves at choke points. Tight halls, glassed doors, automated turrets. Kale was hidden inside a cryo shelter, safe behind triple locks. Don't come out, Rhaenyra told him, no matter what. Kale nodded, eyes wide with fear but also trust. The first explosion rocked the bunker. Steel bent, lights burst, smoke poured through the hallway. One alien soldier entered. John fired twice. The creature dropped. Another charged in. Rhaenyra hit it clean in the chest. Sparks flew, but more were coming. John triggered a hallway trap. An old magnetic mine. It blasted 2 enemies backward in a cloud of fire and dust. We can't hold them, Rhaenyra said, breathless. I know, John shouted over the gunfire. We just need time. For what? He looked toward the locked cryopod room. For me to finish this. He dashed back to the terminal, fingers flying across the keys. He activated the buried defense grid. A deep rumble shook the walls. Warning, the system said. Full deployment will destroy local structure integrity. John ignored it. One last defense. The alien leader stepped into the corridor now. Taller, heavier, with glowing black armor. He spoke in a deep growling voice. Surrender the boy. You cannot win. John stepped forward. We're not giving him to you. You are only one man. No, John said. I'm the last man. And with that, he hit the final button. From the earth below, giant rods of molten energy blasted upward. The entire valley lit up. Alien ships shattered. The bunker trembled. Walls cracked. Beams fell. Flames licked at the edges of every room. John ran back through the shaking corridors, shouting for Rhaenyra. Fall back. The system's overloading. She grabbed Kale and met him at the lower stairs. We'll be buried here, she screamed. John grabbed her arm and led them toward the maintenance tunnel. The emergency escape route he had almost forgotten. The walls groaned as the ceiling above gave way. They dove through the narrow tunnel just as the bunker collapsed behind them in a wave of dust and fire. Hours later, they crawled out into the cold air. The valley was quiet now. Alien bodies lay scattered among burning ship remains. John's shelter, his home, was gone. Rhaenyra collapsed to her knees, Kale still holding her tightly. John stood in silence, looking at the smoking ruin. It's all gone, he whispered. But we're alive, Rhaenyra said. Kale looked up at him. You saved us. John didn't answer right away. He just looked at the sky. It wasn't red anymore. It was blue.
The world was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. John sat by the edge of a rocky slope, watching the smoke rise from the ruins of his shelter. It had taken him years to build it. He had poured his pain into those walls. Now all of it was ash. Behind him, Rhaenyra held Kale close, wrapping him in a torn emergency blanket. They had survived, but just barely. John didn't feel like a hero. He felt hollow. I had food stored for 10 more years, he muttered. Medical supplies, defense, everything, gone. But we're still alive, Rhaenyra said gently. John nodded without looking back. Are we? They walked for 2 days. The planet was harsher than before. The air stung. Ash fell like dirty snow. They found an abandoned outpost deep in the forest hills. Solar-powered, mostly intact. No signs of recent visitors. It would do. John fixed the power core. Rhaenyra made meals from old survival kits. Kale slept for nearly 12 hours at a time. He was healing, but slowly. And then the message came. It wasn't from Earth. Earth had nothing left. The signal came from space, a secure, coded transmission on an old human frequency. John stared at the blinking alert on his screen. Someone's alive, he played the message. A male voice. Rough. Alien. Human survivor. We know the child is with you. Surrender him, or we will send more. Renia stepped forward. How do they know we're still alive? John checked the logs. The shelter's last defense blast triggered a sensor pulse. It lit us up like a beacon. Renia's voice turned cold. They're coming again. John looked at her, then at Kale, who was drawing circles on the dusty floor with his finger. They want him. That's all they want. Renia whispered. Then maybe I should take him away. No, John said firmly. You won't survive alone. You've already seen what they'll do to both of you. Then what do we do? She asked. John didn't answer right away, because deep down, he was thinking about something terrible. That night, John sat with Kale by a broken window. They watched the stars together. Kale leaned his head against John's arm. They'll come again, won't they? Yes, John said quietly. Kale was silent for a moment. Then he looked up. If I go to them, will you and Mama be safe? John's heart twisted. He turned to the boy. Don't ever say that again. Kale's eyes shimmered. But they only want me. I don't care what they want. You're not a thing to give away. But I'm not even human. John placed a hand on Kale's chest. Doesn't matter. You're here. You're with us. You're alive. That makes you family. Kale began to cry. Quiet and soft. John pulled him close and whispered, You're not going anywhere. But the next morning, something changed. Renia found John outside, digging. What are you doing? He didn't stop, preparing something. For what? He looked up at her. His eyes were red, tired. For them. The third night, the ships came again. Smaller this time, quieter, not an army, just 3. They landed half a mile away. And then came the voice, from a floating speaker dropped into the camp by drone. Human, you have something that belongs to us. Give us the boy, or we take everything again. John stepped forward, and replied with a message of his own. Send one of your kind to talk. Unarmed. I'll meet them at dawn. The speaker went silent, then blinked green. At dawn, John walked into the clearing alone. From the other side, an alien approached. Tall, gray-skinned, in ceremonial armor. No weapons, but his hands looked deadly enough. You are the last human, the alien said. John didn't flinch. Apparently, you have the child. Yes, we have no wish to kill, only to retrieve what was stolen. He wasn't stolen, John growled. He was saved. The alien's eyes narrowed. Then make a deal. Give him, and we leave. You'll never see us again. John stepped closer, and if I refuse, we will burn this forest and everything in it, again, to the final human command weapon, buried under Site-09. You burn this place, I light up the sky. You lie. John smiled coldly. Try me. The alien hesitated. John continued. Here's the real deal. You leave now. All of you. And I erase this trigger. You come back. I press the final button. The alien looked at the card again, then slowly turned and walked away. Hours passed. No ships followed. No drones returned. Just silence. Renia sat beside him later that night. You were bluffing. John chuckled weakly. Was I? She stared at him. Were you really going to give Kale to them? He didn't answer. Tears filled her eyes. John finally looked at her and whispered, I almost did. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much. I didn't want to lose him. Or you. She placed a hand over his. You chose right. John stared at the fire. Barely. The sun rose slowly over the ruined trees, casting soft gold across the burned hills. The forest, once broken by fire and fear, now glowed with gentle light. Smoke still hung in the air, but less than before. And for the first time in years, the silence felt different. Not empty, but calm. John stood on a hill, staring at the wreckage below. Bits of metal still poked out from the ashes. His old shelter, the home he'd guarded like a fortress, was gone. But the outpost still stood behind him, stronger than before. And so was he. And sighed. Kale was laughing. He chased a small cleaning drone across the floor, his bare feet tapping softly on the steel panels. His face was rounder now, healthier. His eyes, once filled with fear, now sparkled with mischief. Renia stood at the stove, stirring a pot of broth. The smell of food drifted through the air. Her movements were steady, peaceful, like she'd done this 100 times. But she hadn't. She was learning what peace looked like for the first time in her life. When John entered, she turned and smiled. Morning, she said softly. He nodded. Morning. She gestured to the bowl. It's almost ready. John sat down, watching Cale dance around the drone. The boy stopped and ran to him, throwing his arms around John's waist. John froze for half a second, then hugged him back. You slept well? He asked. Cale nodded quickly. No nightmares this time. John smiled. That was new. Renia laughed as she chased him, bare feet soaking wet. John stood near the rocks, watching them. A breeze passed through the broken trees. New grass poked through the scorched earth. It felt like a beginning. Renia turned back toward him. You okay? He nodded. Just think. She walked to him, her voice quiet. They're really gone, aren't they? Yes. For now. They could come back. John looked at her. Maybe. But if they do, we'll be ready. She smiled faintly. You sound different. Do I? Yes. Less heavy. John chuckled. That's because, for once, I'm not carrying it all alone. Later that evening, Cale sat on the roof, wrapped in a thick blanket, staring at the stars. John joined him, handing him a cup of warm tea. Cale sipped it slowly. John, yeah, can I ask something? Of course. Cale hesitated, then whispered, do you miss your daughter? John went still. Yes, he said softly. Every day. Cale looked down. I think she would have liked it here. I think she would have liked you. John said, would you ever wake her up? John didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars, at Cale, at the outpost behind them. Then he nodded. Someday, when it's safe, when she can smile without fear. Cale smiled. I hope I can meet her. John ruffled his hair. Me too. The next morning, John opened an old crate from the outpost storage. Inside were flags, records, badges from Earth's final days, dusty and forgotten. He pulled out one item, a small device labeled Beacon Terra Rebirth Protocol. It was meant to send a signal across the stars, not for war, but for peace, for gathering, for rebuilding. John stared at it for a long time. Then, he activated it. A soft hum filled the air. Lights blinked green. The message was simple. This is Earth. Survivors remain. Peace found. Sanctuary open. They planted small gardens beside the stream. The crops were slow but growing. John built a small classroom from the outpost's eastern wing. Cale filled its walls with drawings, of stars, of machines, of people holding hands. Renia helped repair an old satellite dish. She taught Cale to read 3 languages, her own, Earth's standard, and one from her father's world. At night, they told stories around the fire, some real, some made up, but all of them had hope. John smiled more often now, not because everything was perfect, but because it wasn't hopeless anymore. Then one evening, the dish blinked. Renia rushed inside. It's a reply. John followed her to the console. A message blinked on the screen. Received. Coordinates confirmed. Human signature detected. Traveling with care. Cale peeked over their shoulders. Is that someone coming? John nodded slowly. Yes, someone heard us. Renia's eyes widened. Other humans, maybe, or allies, or both, John said with a small smile. We'll find out. The next morning, John walked down the trail alone, carrying a small flower in his hand. He reached the ruins of his old bunker. It was quiet. He knelt down in front of a large stone he had placed weeks earlier. His daughter's cryopod, still buried, still safe. He placed the flower there, and whispered, soon, then stood, turned toward the rising sun, and walked back to the new home, where a child waited, where a mother smiled, where Earth was alive again.